These are particles of radioactive fallout.
And now they're exposed to you. So long, sucker.
And this is how a single particle looks magnified several hundred times. A radioactive piece of matter from a nuclear explosion.
Looks like a scab, doesn't it? No, that's a potato. That's a rock.
These few particles can't do us any significant harm. But should there be
So
a
let's just
nuclear
scatter
attack,
them around.
many billions of them would fall from the sky and settle to Earth, releasing radiation that could cause sickness or death in the area where they fall.
It's like the sign that they use to track down the Zodiac killer. About Schmidt. Oh, about Fallout. Isn't it just by Edward Oppenheimer? I mean, they're not sugarcoating it. Build a bunker like in Cloverfield Lane.
To begin with, it may be surprising to know that radiation is something we live with every day.
Our underpants are
Far back
atomic.
in time, back before there was an Earth, there were flaming fireballs in space.
They were called Hadoukens.
We call them stars.
That was close.
And there are millions upon millions of them.
Billions and
Each
billions.
star, like our own sun, is a raging nuclear furnace that shoots out showers of particles too tiny to be matter as we conceive it, along with invisible forces that we call radiation. This radiation and these particles travel through space at fantastic speeds until they strike some other matter, which may make new
They're
flares
wonderful.
of radioactivity. They strike wandering asteroids, moons,
Use that
and
as.
planets such as our own. Everything in space, Earth included, receives this radiation.
Skies partly cloudy this afternoon, clearing but...
Oh no, how will we listen to Fibber McGee and Molly?
Background radiation is all around us in tiny quantities.
So you're gonna be
Nature even
sterile
planted
as hell.
unstable atoms deep inside the Earth itself. They decay one by one, here and there, in a barrage of inconceivably small and silent
The
explosions.
monolith monsters.
Each explosion is another spark of radiation. All life on Earth has reached its present form
Dante's
in
Inferno.
company with radiation from this naturally occurring radioactivity.
I'm getting artsy there.
Extremely thin, with extremely low-level intensity, it has always been with us. It is nothing new. We don't worry about the small amounts of
Hey, you
natural
wanna have some
background radiation.
1956?
But to safely handle larger amounts,
We hire cheap robots.
we must keep our distance and shield ourselves.
It's a claw
For as
machine.
the amounts increase, so do the dangers. The amount of energy generated
Oh,
by a
yeah,
nuclear explosion is enormous. Near the crater area, there is almost total destruction from blast and heat. And now, large amounts of pulverized debris and molten earth are pulled up into the mushroom cloud. This is where radioactive fallout is formed.
It's a very cheery short, you have to give it
produced in the
that.
explosion join with the particles of earth and debris. The mushroom-shaped cloud forms and climbs higher. It now contains billions of highly radioactive particles of matter that we call fallout. The strong winds of the upper altitudes go to work on the cloud.
Kids play with Fallout. They do it all the time.
Gravity tugs on
I'm
the
sorry, they
particles.
play Fallout.
The larger and heavier ones sink toward the ground, while the lighter particles continue to drift with the wind. Some of the lightest particles remain suspended in the upper
The radiation, my friend, is
As
blowing in the
time
wind.
passes, their radioactivity grows weaker, so that the longer they remain aloft, the less dangerous they are. But the heavier particles, spread by high altitude
The fatty
winds,
particles.
fall to the ground within 24 hours. Several miles from the explosion, they are about the size of table salt or fine sand. These are the most
Cocaine,
dangerous
not that I'd know.
because they carry the greatest number of radioactive atoms and so emit the largest amount of nuclear radiation. Which brings us to an all-important fact.
Spirograph.
Deadly as radiation can be. And this gives us
I'm
an
morally safer.
invaluable ally: time. Suppose a nuclear explosion takes place at 12 noon. By 1
Again,
o'clock,
I'm morally
the
safer.
total force of the residual radiation is at a high level. By 7 o'clock, it's down to 1/10. In 2 days, although still dangerous, it's only 1/100th. But in 2 weeks, it's only 1/1,000th.
This is still really that dangerous.
With this decay rate in mind, consider radioactive fallout conditions which might confront us after a massive attack. Within an hour, fallout would be a serious problem in the vicinity of explosions which occur on or near the ground. By 7 hours after the attack, the fallout area covers more and more of the country as the prevailing winds expand
had
the
your kid
fallout
draw on
in a
the map,
downwind
didn't you?
pattern. 24 hours. 48 hours. Without shelter, millions would face death. A few days later, those who have taken shelter will survive. In many areas, people can even leave shelter for brief periods of time to carry out important tasks.
And grow extra limbs.
Within 2 weeks, most people can leave their shelters for longer periods as the radioactivity decays to lower levels. The lesson is obvious. We must shield ourselves from radiation through the dangerous period.
With tinfoil.
To do this, we need more than time. Fortunately, we have another ally. Distance.
The British. Oh.
The greater our distance from the fallout particles, the less radiation we receive. You would receive less radiation in the middle of a tall building than you would receive on the top or bottom floors, because there would be more distance and partitions between you and the source of the radiation, the fallout particles which would cover the roof and the ground around the building.
So head to the
Only an
basement for
insignificant
everything.
amount would get inside.
Heat. Air conditioner be
And
damned.
finally, along with decay rate and distance, we have still another and very important ally: mass.
Oh, I was going to say
When highly
Magneto.
radioactive fallout covers our immediate area, we can shield ourselves through the most dangerous period by using the sheer weight of any material. But the protecting material must be heavy. To shield out some 99% of the radiation, you would need about
Can you
5.5
push it off
feet
the
of wood.
screen?
or 2 feet of earth, or 1 1/3 feet of concrete, or a 1/2 foot of steel. Even though the thickness of these materials varies, they all weigh the same.
Wait, is this a math problem?
Taking a house as an example,
Because I'm shit
it
at
offers
math.
a small amount of mass and distance from radiation, but not enough protection in an area of heavy fallout. The solution is plain. Fallout shelters are the best defense against nuclear radiation. Whether in a home for
Always
a
bring a
single
radio,
family,
books, and a trash can.
or a large community type in an apartment building, they offer the kind of protection from radiation you would probably need in case of a nuclear attack.
We're too fancy to call it nuclear.
But the best shelter would be worthless unless it was used. Most people find it hard to understand how
Patty Duke's
silent,
dad.
invisible rays, which cannot even be felt, could be so damaging. Let's see what happens when radiation penetrates the body and attacks the cells.
Oh god, do
What
we
is
have
a
to?
cell, and what happens when it is attacked? It's a simple organism which reproduces itself by dividing. Our bodies are made up of millions of cells. They're the building blocks of our blood and tissues. Now,
And they look like
powerful radiation
cornflakes.
strikes, and cells are injured or destroyed. If radiation stops before the accumulated dose is too great, almost all of the damage eventually will be repaired. If radiation continues, there are some cells less able to function at top efficiency.
Of course, if you're
Should the
Wolverine, none
body
of this
fall
matters to
behind in
you.
its recovery, severe illness or death could result. The key then is the amount, the total
The amount
dose
of car you
radiation
have, look at that
received.
thing.
We measure radiation the same way speed is measured by a speedometer. Only instead of a speedometer, we have a rate meter. And instead of miles per hour, we measure the rate in Roentgens per hour. We need another
And instead
device
of
called a
chips, we have
dosimeter
french
to
fries.
record how much radiation a person has accumulated over a period of time. In the same way we record
is applied
accumulated
correctly.
distance in miles, the dosimeter records accumulated dose in Roentgens. With this in mind, let's return to background radiation.
It's a
In an
man's
average
X-ray
lifetime, a
eyes.
person might expect to accumulate about 10 Roentgens from his natural environment. Not enough to affect his health. This same healthy person would need medical care if he received more than 200 Roentgens within a few days. 300 Roentgens in the same period would cause severe radiation sickness or possibly death. And as we go
400 don't even get me
beyond
started.
300 Roentgens, the danger of death increases rapidly. So now we see why shelter is vital. The difference between accumulating a large dose because of little or no shielding and a small dose because of adequate shielding is the difference between death and life.
Are the stormtroopers
No
shooting at the
clothing, of course,
building?
could possibly provide enough shielding.
Inspector Gadget.
However, if you were to be in the open during fallout conditions,
I will
clothing would
prevail.
keep the particles from touching your skin. There is no such thing as a fallout suit, but ordinary clothing would help until you could reach
There are
the safety of
fallout
a shelter.
skins.
Then the fallout particles can be brushed off and outer clothing removed. If fallout settles on your food, the food itself is not harmed, since radiation damages only living tissue. And you can easily
And all of your
decontaminate
food
it
is dead.
using almost the same methods you use in everyday food preparation. Actually, even if you accidentally swallowed some fallout particles, it wouldn't kill you. The
If you
effects, if
chucked
any,
it, though.
probably wouldn't show up for years. Still, since there is a possibility of long-term effects, such as shortened lifespan, cancer, or hereditary damage, it's wise to remove the radioactive
Or
particles
growing a
by
second
simply
butt.
washing, wiping, or peeling. But it's vital to remember this. Neither water nor
You
chemicals
can't put your elbow in your
can
ear.
destroy radioactivity. The fallout particles can only be moved or washed away. Only time can reduce their potency. And what of water? Well,
What
here
of
again,
water?
the same rules apply. If necessary, you could drink water containing fallout particles without worry or immediate harm. But chances are you wouldn't have to for long, for water helps to wash itself through the natural processes of sedimentation and filtration.
Oh, water washes
And
itself. It takes a
swiftly moving
bath
rivers
every
like
day.
this can
Ooh.
carry most fallout particles downstream. In
This is
still waters,
beautiful day.
most particles would settle quickly to the bottom. Others might remain suspended in the water for a long time, while a small percent of the radioactivity would dissolve.
And some would create octosharks.
The normal processing of a water treatment plant would make it safe to drink. And water coming from a covered well would be safe from radioactive contamination. There is no problem with breathing, for air is not contaminated once the fallout is on the ground. Fallout is not a
Oh,
poison
thank God I was
gas.
holding my breath this
If
entire time.
ventilation is needed in a shelter, a simple inverted U fitting on a ventilating pipe would keep fallout particles from entering the pipe and getting inside. Of
Or
course,
you could
surviving
just
a nuclear
accept death.
attack means more than just waiting in a shelter for radioactivity to decay to safe levels. Survival, reconstruction, and recovery would involve decontamination in many areas.
Remember, drive your
A
cycle
very
really,
difficult
really
job.
slow.
Unit 8 at Elman Morse. Dose rate 15 Roentgens per hour.
Don't know why you didn't give me a containment suit.
Fallout would have to be removed from important areas by street sweepers. And the remaining particles could be flushed out of the way.
Hello. I'm Pennywise. Would you like to play a game?
Food would be a problem. After a nuclear attack,
Hey, food is always a
we
problem
would
in my
first
head.
use existing food supplies from shelters, markets, and surplus food storage. When fallout had decayed to safe levels, people could begin to work in the fields for limited periods of time. In a few
Is
areas,
this in
the
case
land would
Fist of
not
the
be
North
suitable
Star
for
actually
food,
happens?
but such crops as cotton could be grown.
God.
Crops for human consumption would be grown in areas that had received the least fallout.
Like planting gummy bears?
The reason we would be able to grow and eat food planted in this land is that the transfer of radioactivity from soil to plants is extremely low.
Oh God, what is that? Get it off. Get it off, get it off, get it off. Ew, they're spreading.
And so, if nuclear attack should ever come, in spite of every effort to avoid it, we must be able to survive and rebuild for the future.
Must we?
But
Yeah,
survival
the good
can only
run.
come through knowledge. The basic facts we must all know are relatively simple. First, there is nothing new about radiation. It has always been with us. What is new is the vast amount we would be exposed to as a result of nuclear explosions.
You're saying that's William Cat's
Much
hair.
of this danger would come to us in the form of fallout. But we are not
Or
without personal
Fortnite.
weapons or defense. One of these is time. Radiation decays, and so we would not have to take maximum precautions indefinitely. Another
Maximum
defense
precautions
is
with
distance.
minimum effort.
Radiating particles 50 feet away, for instance, would not affect us as much as particles a few feet away. And our third defense is mass. Any material with enough weight will keep the penetrating rays from hurting us.
You said
The
penetrating.
greater the weight of the material between us and the particles, the safer we would be. The best way we can use all three weapons of defense is with an adequate shelter, thick enough to shield off a good part
Oh,
of the
we ain't got
radiation
shelter
until it has
either.
decayed to safer levels. When radiation attacks, the cells of our body are damaged. Most of them can repair themselves if the total dose over a period of time is not too high.
If you're a Highlander,
Even though the rays penetrate our bodies, causing damage, they do not infect us and make us, or anything else, radioactive.
yeah, Highlander.
That's why food remains good no matter how much radiation has passed through it.
Except for my
Fallout
wife's
accidentally
cooking.
swallowed with water or food will do you no immediate harm. But for long-term safety, it's best to wash, wipe, or peel the food
Don't say
and
wife.
filter the water. Even if you were caught outside under fallout conditions, ordinary clothing would keep the radioactive particles from touching your skin. But you would still need to find shelter quickly. If we
Take your
remember these
pants off as well.
if we act on them intelligently, we can increase our chances of surviving nuclear attack. And the key to survival is adequate shelter. That is why the federal government has a nationwide
so many
fallout
beans.
shelter program. The goal is adequate fallout shelter space for every man, woman, and child. And this goal can be reached. For with knowledge of radiation, we can face the facts about
I hope this
fallout
scene doesn't end like that
Take
one
action
dream
to
sequence in
protect
Terminator
ourselves.
2.
and learn how to live in the nuclear age.
About Fallout. Production by Wilding. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Presented by God. Yeah, I was way off. They won't listen to you, but you can call them if you want.